So I have this theory. I'm a political scientist. I'm not a developmental psychologist. But I have this theory that children of color in the United States become acutely aware of their race at about age 4. I have a niece who is going to turn 5 next week, and so there are things she's done in the last year that are kind of signaling to me that she's aware of the differences between her and her white classmates in particular. And when I was her age, somehow I became very fascinated with Pocahontas. I'm from Virginia, so I'm from the East Coast, and I grew up about 5 miles away from where Pocahontas lived with John Rolfe. And somehow I heard that I had Native American ancestry. And that became really fascinating to me. Like, I didn't know the history of Native Americans in the United States. I didn't know the history sort of oppression and extermination in the United States. So somehow I thought that that was different and perhaps better than what I did, because I announced one day that I was running away to China to become an Indian. Yeah, didn't quite understand how that works or how you run across the Pacific Ocean, but, my mom thought that was, really interesting. And so, I look back and I reflect on that. I was becoming aware of race, and I was becoming aware of the fact that I was part of a caste group that was not necessarily high in the social hierarchy. And so the way that I internalized that was not necessarily the healthiest thing in the world. And so, as I grew up, I probably wanted to be more of an individual. There were certainly ways in which I felt a little different sometimes from my African American classmates. I can't think of specific times when I may have been directly called an Oreo for being smart, but I certainly got that. I was kind of ostracized from some of my Black peers as a result of wanting to do well in school. So I experienced that. Lots of people experience that. And so I found myself kind of detaching from race a lot through high school. So if you talk to my friends in high school, if you talk to my friends, especially for the first part of college, I was very consciously diverse in the friends that I chose. And by being diverse, that meant I didn't have a whole lot of Black friends. And the Black friends that I do have will tell stories about how they occasionally had to defend me in front of other African American students, and I have much warmer, wonderful relationships with all of these people now, but it was definitely an interesting thing. What changed for me was coming to college and being in an academic experience where I could study racial issues and study history. And as much as I wanted to be detached from it on a social level, I didn't want to be detached from it intellectually. So I was taking classes in African American history, I was taking classes in race and politics. And through those classes and through some of the interactions, I lived in the multicultural house in college, and my classmates would challenge me to sort of rethink some of the things that I thought about race, and to not necessarily make it an abstraction, but to also think about the ways that this did affect my life, and I could either act like I was oblivious to the fact that there was racial difference in the United States, or I could learn something about it and then be proactive and do something about it. So, there was definitely this transformation that started to happen for me probably about 19 or 20 years old. Yeah.
Simi, same kind of question?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, fantastic. I'm the child of immigrants, so I'm second gen. My parents came from Karnataka in South India back in 1969, and I was born in 1976, and grew up right outside of Chicago. Any Midwesterners in the room? All right, okay. And so immediately I've told you something specific, right? So this kind of bicultural experience of having parents from India, born and raised here, also being Indian American right outside of Chicago, which is still largely Black and white, and particularly when I was growing up there in the 80s and 90s, Evanston, it was fairly hyper-segregated as a Black and white town. I grew up in North Evanston for the first few years, largely white, grew up in South Evanston, largely Black, for the rest of grade school and middle school and high school. So very specific experience, and like many other Indian American kids, I was skinny and brown and had braces and glasses, so I was not cool by any stretch of the imagination. But that sort of paradigm of mix of knowing from a very early age that I was different, that I was not Black or white, having a really strong ethnic heritage as an Indian and an Indian American, and specifically ties to Karnataka, to South India, to my mother tongue, which is Kannada. All those kinds of things were really important to me, but especially by middle school and high school, really coming to understand myself as the other, right? And what does the other mean, especially with the capital O, in a dominant Black and white paradigm? And those kinds of thoughts occupied me. And, in high school, I got involved also in cool things like Advanced Spanish Club and the Young Feminist Club. Super, super awesome stuff. And my family also, we were low income for a number of years. So all of these kinds of things were nexus points of my own identity as I was thinking about difference, similarity, and what does power look like? Who has access to it? And there was a lot of transformation for me, particularly in college. And I think I was largely primed to explore college in a really specific way because my father is, he's a political economist, he's a Marxist scholar, and so having a framework from a very young age of looking at politics and economics and justice in really different kinds of ways. We grew up going to marches and rallies. And so in college, I got there, I was going to be pre-med, and then after the first week, realized calculus and organic chemistry were not for me. So then I was not pre-med after week 1. But I was trying to figure myself out, like most people do in college, and that's where huge transformations occurred for me because this strong ethnic and race identity as other really became integrated with a broader Asian American framework, and I identify very strongly as an Asian American for all the political implications that it has, in addition to all my other identities as a leftist and as a woman, as a feminist, as a mom, all those kinds of things. But I got involved in the struggle for Asian American studies, and that really defined me because this question of who owns knowledge and who owns the distribution of knowledge, who owns what we get to learn, or study, or teach, or practice, those all became really, like you said, not just abstract, but very concrete questions for my entire college experience.